It's approximately 7 o'clock, and it is December 9. At this time, I'll call the meeting to order. The board consists of 5 members and 2 alternates. The alternates take full part in the discussions and become voting members in the absence of a member or when a member abstains for a conflict of interest. Present tonight are Greg Lavelle, John Gulsey, Lisa Carson, Joan Kronowski. I'm Betty Hollow. Also present is Paul Eschenbacher, our acting secretary, and our representative from the Code Office. The board operates according to the following procedure. The chair will name and describe the case. The zoning administrator will state the basis of the objection and any applicable facts or conditions pertaining to the case. The appellant or their representative will give reasons why the appeal should be viewed favorably. Anyone wishing to speak in favor of the request will be heard. Anyone wishing to speak in general comment will be heard. Anyone wishing to speak in opposition will be heard. If necessary, the appellant or their representative will offer concluding summary or rebuttal remarks. Testimony from the floor shall be closed. The board will deliberate and render a decision. According to Athens City Code Section 230703B, the board has the power to grant variances from the strict application of the code, provided the variance will not be contrary to the public interest, the spirit of the code is observed, public safety and welfare are secured, and substantial justice is done. According to Athens City Code Section 230910C, variances from the code shall not be granted unless the board finds, based on direct specific findings of fact, that each of the following conditions have been supported. Practical difficulty and undue hardship. Because of exceptional or extraordinary circumstances or conditions pertaining to a specific piece of property, a literal enforcement of these regulations will result in practical difficulty or undue hardship that is unnecessary to the achievement of public purposes. Exceptional circumstances. They are exceptional or extraordinary circumstances or conditions applying to the property in question or to the intended use of the property that do not apply generally to other properties or classes or uses in the same zone. Preservation of equal property rights. Literal interpretation of these regulations would deprive the appellant of rights commonly enjoyed by others in the same zone and the same vicinity, while a granting of the requested variance will not confer on the applicant any special privilege that is denied to other properties in the same zone and the same vicinity. Minimum variance. The variance granted is the minimum variance required to make possible the reasonable use of the property. Absence of detriment. The authorizing of such variance will not be of substantial detriment to adjacent property and will not materially impair the purpose of the zoning code or the public interest. Not of a general nature. The condition or situation of the specific piece of property or the intended use of said property for which such variance is sought, one or the other or in combination, is not of so general or recurrent a nature as to make reasonably practicable the formulation of a general regulation for such condition or situation. The board also has the power to review decisions of the zoning administrator where an error is alleged. He requests for conditionally permitted uses. He requests for substitution of non-conforming uses. Determine the number of required off-street parking spaces if the specific use is not contained in Section 2311 Table B. He requests for temporary use of structures or premises. Consider requests for extension or temporary permits after receiving a recommendation from the Athens City Planning. He requests for business use variances after receiving a recommendation from the Athens City Planning Commission, and he requests for variance from the strict application of the Athens City Code, Title 25, Flood Damage Prevention. Any person, resident or officer, department, or appointed body of the City of Athens, aggrieved by a decision of the board, may petition the Athens County Court of Common Pleas concerning the illegality of the decision. Such petition must be filed within 30 days after the mailing of the decision of the board to the applicant. There are 4 cases on tonight's agenda. Case 08-27B at 13 Meadow Lane. The zone is R3. Pam Stratchler is the appellant. Case 0828V at 19 Oak Street, also in Zone 3. Case 0829V in Zone R1 at 125 Franklin Avenue. And case 0830V in Zone B3 at 960 East State Street. The appellant is the Hocking Valley Motor Company. Brian Chrisman is the appellant. Okay. So, we will begin with this first case, 0827V, 13 Meadow Lane. The appellant is requesting a variance from Section 2311, Table A, Schedule of Bulk Controls, to allow construction of an attached deck with side setbacks of 2.6 feet and 7 feet for a total of 9.6 feet, where 8 feet on either side and a total of 18 feet is the required minimum, and a rear setback of 10 feet, where 30 feet is the required minimum, and a total lot coverage of 44%, where 30% is the required minimum. Mr. Eschenbacher, could you speak to us about this?
Just for identification's sake, my name is Paul Eschenbacher. This case is pretty straightforward in its request, and Ms. Stackler made her reasons pretty plain, so I really don't have much else to add. So if you guys have any questions about this particular case.
Well, just for the record, I guess we should point out that this is not a request for a deck, but it's a request for a variance for a deck that already exists.
Yes.
Okay. And maybe the appellant would like to speak if you don't have anything else you think
Well,
needs to be
if
said.
nobody else has any questions, did you?
I was curious as to the complaint that was made. I mean, this was brought up.
I'm not sure exactly what she means. I think she was referring to our complaint about
Okay.
she built it without getting the permit first.
Yeah, it's an existing deck.
Yes, I know, but I thought it was brought to the attention of the code office because
There was a
a complaint.
complaint by a lady that lives completely on the other side.
We're going to let you speak
I'm
when it's your
sorry.
turn so that we can get it on.
Oh,
Yeah, we can put you at the microphone so it will be on the record.
Oh, okay.
No, I keep forgetting things. Yes, we haven't sworn anybody in.
Oh,
So let's do that.
okay.
So anybody who wishes to speak tonight should stand. And do you swear to tell the truth?
Yes.
Yes.
All right. Thank you, Greg. Okay, so let us get our appellant up, and if you will state your name and your address for the record.
Up there?
Yes, if you would do that, and if you'll just explain your situation and why you need this variance and wish that it would be granted.
Okay, thank you. Well,
Tell us your name and address.
I'm sorry. My name's Pam Stackler, and I live at 13 Meadow Lane. I'm sorry, I'm a little bit nervous. I feel like I'm before the Supreme Court
Well,
or something.
You know, I've already made some mistakes, so hey, it's okay.
Okay, it's okay. I have 3 children, and I lived on the east side. I rented from Mr. Fritz Wheaton for about 8 years, and my 2 oldest children, who are 27, 25 now, grew up on the east side, and I always loved the east side, but I could never afford anything there. And then my son went off to war, and my daughter went off to college, and I lived in the country. And then I had the opportunity, when my son came back from Iraq, he said, you need to downsize, move to the east side, and one of the townhouses there in that little complex, which I always loved, became available. And Liz Mall helped me purchase it, and it had been empty for quite some time, and no matter where I lived, whether I rented or whether I owned it, I always try to make everything really nice. And unfortunately, the lady was an older lady and very ill, and the outside was rather unsightly. And so when my son came home, he said, you know, Mom, let's build you a little deck here on the back, and it'll look pretty, and then we'll have a place to cook out. And I said, okay, and then I did some landscaping, and a lady that lives on the other side that doesn't know me or can't even see me made a complaint, and all at once these gentlemen showed up and said, do you have a permit? And I didn't know I needed a permit for a deck. I had never owned anything in the city of Athens, and I just thought as long as I was making good improvements, and I had consulted with all my immediate neighbors, and they're like, oh yeah, it's no big deal because there's another deck, and then there's a big 6-foot-high fence, and I truly didn't know I needed a permit. So my son built it, which saved me money and labor, cost me a lot of dinners. And so when they showed up, I was surprised, and I said, oh, I didn't know what to do, so I just did what they told me to. And all the neighbors wrote letters. People used to walk through my backyard and with their dogs, and I stepped in doo-doo a couple times, and I just simply didn't know I needed a permit, and I'm really sorry.
You say you didn't know about the permit.
Well, I think it is conferring special privilege just by the lot coverage. I'm still in favor of the density, but the way the code's written, I think it's special privilege.
Mr. Eschenbacher, are these lots of a smaller size than others on the east side, which don't, of course, meet code?
Generally speaking, yes, and they're
For the reasonable use of the property.
There's right have to disagree. You know, it's
Yeah.
like the son didn't know. I'm sure he visualized a nice sized deck and bought the lumber and off he went.
Right.
So, because he didn't know either what was
Right.
taking place.
And it is a very nice deck, there's no question about it.
And again, assume it's not built yet, so in that case, that would not be minimal.
No. It would be like, can you make it, you know, can you cut 4 feet off that?
Because it says, what is it? It's just a side back
And I'm sure
setback,
they-
and also, lot coverage. It's just a setback, front, back, side, and lot coverage. So it's not really minimal.
And I'm sure that
There's
if they
no-
were here before it was built, they would, I'm sure, would have agreed to
Right,
make it
Make it
smaller.
smaller.
So
Right.
that they could have the deck. But again, it's after the fact, they didn't know, so this is a rare one. I don't think I've sat in a case before, other than
Where
those
something has
portable
already been
storage
built.
sheds that people buy from Lowe's. Those need building permits, and I don't
Right.
think
People probably don't know
it's
that.
posted out there that
Yeah.
you need a building permit to put this on your property.
Yeah.
So other than that
Well,
type
we
of
have
case-
had cases before where something was already built, or in process of being
Yes,
built
and-
when it was noticed. Okay. Okay, absence of detriment. The authorizing of such variance will not be of substantial detriment to adjacent property and will not materially impair the purpose of the zoning code or the public interest.
Yeah, I don't think it's really going to cause a lot of detriment. Most of the people agree that it's okay. I'm surprised how many people that own those don't live there.
Right.
So
Lots of them open to
they're sort of, you know, so
Right,
they have
they
no
don't care.
complaints.
Well, maybe they do care, I don't know. Not of a general nature, the condition or situation of the specific piece of property, the intended use of said property for which the variance is sought, is not of so general or recurrent a nature as to make reasonably practicable the formulation of a general regulation for such condition or situation.
No, it's not.
We don't have to worry about that, I think. What else would you like to say about this?
Well, I'm wondering if we could write something into the variance that would make the type of development that this property is located in, and the the size of the lots, part of the rationale. I think I'm still going back to this density thing. I think, you know, in some other neighborhoods, I mean, if my neighbor did that to me, I would be like, oh my goodness, I'm going to have to look at them.
Right.
So, but I think because of the layout of this particular housing development, the exception could be made, but just if,
We could only discuss those 6 items, you know, and
Okay.
we already have done that, so you know,
Okay.
we could add to those, you know, those findings maybe within those 6 criteria.
Well,
But we can add anything.
Really, truly in the floodplain, so like muddy and wet, and he knew that I didn't want to mow grass, and he's like, well, we'll just make this so it's really nice.
Right,
We'll
yeah.
get rid of the mud, we'll get rid
Right.
of the water, and you don't have to mow the grass, and it'll be pretty.
well, you do have.
And that's
a
why I
variance.
planted the trees.
Okay. All right, we're going to move on to the next case, which is 0828V.
Thank you very much, and I'm very sorry.
The next case is 0828V, 19 Oak Street. It's in Zone R3. The appellant is Managed Investment Assets, LLC. They're requesting a variance from Section 2311, Table B, off-street parking requirements to allow 6 rental units, where 5 rental units are allowed by the permit that's in force, with 4 current parking spaces where a minimum of 12 are allowed or required. So, Mr. Eschenbacher.
I wanted to hand out, we got a late letter of support from the neighbor for this case. It's only 2 sentences, the handwriting there on the bottom right. Yeah, it's just 2 sentences.
I have it right now.
In this case, the one thing I wanted to bring up, one of the things I wanted to bring up was in Mr. Shostak's letter, he was slightly incorrect in saying it was an administrative error that caused this to be considered a 5-unit building instead of 6 units. The history of this place is, looking back at rental permits as far back as I could, back to the early 80s, it had previously been registered and approved as a 6-unit building. But in 1988, when Athens Rental Management bought it, and they filled out a permit in 91, for some reason they reduced it to 5. Not sure why, but anyway, they put it down as 5, and that's what we accepted it as. And again, that rental permit was filled out in 1991. When Managed Assets, Investment Assets purchased it, from looking at the inspections and stuff, it looked like it had been gone back to a 6-unit building. I know for a fact at one time it was only 5 units because when I did inspections there in the mid-90s, Apartment F was not used. But since then, looking at the inspections, it was apparent that one of the officers a few years ago, who's not with us anymore, did an inspection, and people took him around to Apartment F, and he didn't realize that this was a new wrinkle or reopened apartment, so he inspected it, and it was inspected twice since then. So that was the error from our office, was that we didn't catch that the 6-unit had been open again. But again, there was an official rental permit in 1991 that stated 5 units, and that's what we accepted at that time.
And how many tenants did that include then, do you know?
Shoot, I knew I should have brought the permit with me. Oh, here it is.
We've probably got it.
It says they're requesting 2 people per unit. And as far as I know, that's what it was approved for the 5-unit building, was 2 tenants per unit.
So that would have made them have 10.
Yeah.
And then with the 6, then what happens?
You'll probably have to ask Mr.
Okay,
Shostak.
all right. Do you all have questions for Mr. Eschenbacher before we go on? Okay.
What
thank
type
you.
of parking do they have now?
They just have 4 spaces along the
Accessible.
side on the Palmer Place side of it. If you're looking, it's the last place on the left on Oak Street, and the parking goes alongside the right side of the house as you're facing it.
It's 2 and 2, they're stacked 2 and 2, 1, 2.
Stack 2 and 2. It's grandfathered stacking, in other words.
I thought once a property sold, the grandfather was lost. No, it's
No,
not.
changing
it's
Yeah.
change the use.
Change the use. Change the use from 5 to 6?
Well, we can talk about that, because the parking rules have also changed since.
Well, I mean, that's why they have to seek a variance,
Right.
because they're trying to reinstate the 6th unit
Right.
officially. They have to fully comply with all parking regulations.
Paul, do you know if this property, the landlord's filed a tenant occupant forms to know how many people are actually living there?
No, I don't know.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. Okay. So, I believe, Mr. Shostak, you give us your name and address, please, sir?
Good evening. I'm R.J. Shostak, and I'm the trustee for the Managed Investment Trust that owns the Managed Investment Assets LLC that owns this building. I took over management of these properties, the Managed Investment Assets LLC properties, in June of last year. This is an estate plan created by Dr. Michael for his wife Terry, and at one time prior to June of 2007, Mr. Michael managed these properties. He relocated to Phoenix, Arizona, and these properties were transferred into the LLC as a part of the estate plan. So when I took these properties over, I took them in the condition that they were in and operated them in that fashion. I had a meeting with Charles Miller. I guess he's now departed the city, but in any event, when I was at that meeting with him, he indicated to me that this was, in his view, an administrative error, so I would beg to differ with Paul with regard to that characterization. That's how it was described to me. I also went through the records and observed what was in the records that the city maintained. And my evaluation and investigation shows the following. I didn't make copies, but I'll be happy to bring them up and show them to the board members. The earliest document that I found was one from July 17 of 1978, in which it indicates this has 6 apartments and the maximum number of occupants would be 14. At that time, there were 5 parking spaces. The next document that I found in the company files that were provided to me is August the 12th of 1988. It also identifies the number of parking spaces as 5. And this document is signed by Charles Miller, which indicates that the zoning is okay. I was informed that at this time in 1988, there were 6 units that were being rented, although I have no independent verification of that.
Okay, I need to stop you right there. Could you say those last 3 or 4 sentences again?
Sure.
He said the zoning is okay.
Yes.
It's not the zoning we're questioning, it's the number of units was okay. Is that what you mean?
Well, I don't know. I'll show you the document. I'm only reading
Okay.
what the document says.
Okay.
I'm assuming that when Mr. Miller went out there in 1988, he inspected the entire premises,
Right.
and consequently he approved it in the condition he found in 1988.
Okay, and at that time, there were the 6 units.
Yes, that's what I am informed, that there were 6 units at that time. That would have been 20 years ago.
Mhm.
On August the 19th of 1988, there's a document, application for a permit rental for 19 Oak Street by Nathan Michael, and it identifies the number of units as 6. It is signed by Mr. Michael, and I cannot tell who authorized this on behalf of the city. So at least as of 1988, in August, there were 6 units being rented at that time. The unit, by the way, that we're referring to here we have designated as Unit F, as in Frank. The next document that I have from the company files is dated August the 26th, July the 16th of 1991, approved by Mr. Miller as housing inspector as 8/30/91, which for some reason says 4 parking spaces this time. But once again, it's an update of information. Zoning is okay, and it's recommended as approval.
And the units were 6?
It doesn't identify on this document how many units there are.
Okay.
My independent source, the former manager for Athens Rental Management, who is here today, I believe will verify that there were 6 units at that time. The next document that I was able to find in the company files is dated July 19th of 2006. It is a notice of violation and identifies 19 Oak Street and apartment F as requiring a secure floor covering, an Athens code violation, which my understanding is was abated back at that time. That would have been 2006. So as of that moment, the city was aware that apartment F was being rented. The next document that I located in the company files is dated, I'm sorry, I messed up the chronology for you, January 31 of 2002. And once again, it is an inspection which identifies apartment F as requiring some conversion of outlets, a fire extinguisher, and 2 open bulb lamps in the closets, which needed to be repaired. So at least at that point in time, once again, the city is acknowledging that the apartment exists, that there are some corrections that needed to be made, which were made, and we went on. So when I took over the management of these properties, I proceeded to continue to rent them in the same fashion. When I took it over in June of 2007, apartment F had just been vacated, but had already been rented for the coming university year, which would have been 2007 to 2008. In February of 2008, I'm sorry, let me back up. In November of 2007, Mrs. Terry Michael, whom I had engaged to work as a rental agent to show the properties and get them rented for the succeeding year, told me we had to reapply for various permits, and she said she would fill them all out, which she did. But what she did when she filled them out, however, was that she took 2 as the occupants for each of these apartments, multiplied it times 6, and came up with 12. Then she submitted that, and that's what caught the attention of the city, because it changed the occupancy from 12 occupants to, from 10 occupants to 12.
But
So-
in fact, initially you said there were 14 occupants.
Yes, but that was reduced. When I took it over, there were only 10 that
Okay.
were allowed in that building, and I kept it at 10. And it's currently at 10, and will remain at 10. So that was rejected by Mr. Eschenbacher on that basis, because we had increased it from 10 to 12, which would have been a destruction of our grandfathering of this particular building, which of course we didn't want to do. It was an oversight on Terry Michael's part. When the problem was brought to my attention, I tried to amend the application to say that was a mistake, let's bring it back to 10. Mr. Miller then indicated that that would nonetheless be rejected, and that I should apply to the zoning board for a permit. I called him and he said, well, let's have a meeting, maybe we can figure out a way to take care of this. I know what it was that you intended to do. We had that meeting. He said, I'm only here on the interim. I'm not prepared to take on this kind of a decision to give you the permit for 6 units, 10 occupants. I'd rather you took it to the zoning board. I said, fine, but I'll take it to the zoning board, and that's why I'm here. You will notice on my appeal document that I have identified that Mr. Miller did not object to the granting of this zoning certificate and the rental permits for 6 units, and that would be A, B, C, D, E, and F, with a maximum of 10 occupants. There are 5 spaces, they're not really 4. You can stack 3 in one of the places, 2 in one, 3 in the other. All I'm asking is that you identify and confirm what apparently has been the historical use of this building, which is to have it with 6 apartments for the last 20 years. We do not intend to increase occupancy. The way we got to 10 is apartments A, B, D, and F can handle 2 each. C and E are only 1 occupant apartments, and that gives you a total of 10. So this is merely a request on our part to recognize what has been the historical use of this building for the last at least 20 years that I'm aware of, which is 6 apartments, 10 occupants, and 5 parking spaces.
Well, I want to make sure I understand. If we all agree that there's always been 6 units and you have got away with 4 or 5 parking lot, and that should be grandfathered, so you don't really need any variance then?
This is not a request for a variance, this is a
Yeah.
request for a zoning certificate
Okay.
to recognize our continued grandfather status.
It is as a variance,
You're
request for a
asking for
Well,
the
variance.
variance.
I know, but I thought that I had made it clear in my narrative.
But am I correct, if we agree that this has been historically always 6 units,
Yes,
and then you have always had 4 or 5 parking space, then we don't need to even discuss this,
that's
in
correct.
further-
All you're doing is saying, issue the certificate, we recognize this has been the historical use
Okay.
of this
Because
building.
if we grant a variance, then this is going to stay, then you can actually go and continue the business, even after remodeling or whatever you do.
Right.
So, okay.
That's not my intention. No, my intention is to maintain the property
As
the
it
way
is.
that I took it over so that I can provide an income stream for Dr. Michael's widow, which is what the purpose of these
Okay.
buildings are. And once she dies, it's inherited by the children, and they will do with it whatever they wish. But whenever they change ownership, of course, at that time, they would have to reapply for
Right.
any new permits.
We don't have to
Um,
read it.
So, that's essentially what I'm doing. So, no, I'm not asking for any variance. What I'm
Okay.
asking for is a
Yes, you are.
recognition.
This was advertised as a variance. We have to treat it as a variance.
Okay,
And the
well,
result will be pretty much the same thing. But I
Well-
don't know that we can just say, oh, no, it's not really a variance, when it says right here that you're requesting variance. We'll ask Mr. Eschenbacher.
Well, Mr. Miller is the one who asked me to come here because he said, I am not going to sign the
Yes.
zoning certificate and take it upon myself. You made the mistake, Mr. Shostak, you better fix it.
Okay,
Well, maybe he meant to interpret the decision made by the,
that's not what we're being asked to do.
Yeah, I know, but we
Although
could
that
maybe-
comes
we can
into
do
it.
that, yeah.
Sure, comes into it.
Well,
but I don't like to give a variance to
It-
this problem.
this case does not fall
We can
in the
talk
usual
about that.
category of items that all of you have to deal with here on the board. Okay? So I recognize that perhaps the document filed is inaccurate, but what I'm telling you is this is not a request for a variance, it's a request to recognize the continued historical use of this building. 10 occupants, 5 parking spaces, stacked, as Paul indicated, and 10, 6 units, A, B, C, D, E, and F.
Okay.
And I have these documents here if you'd like to review those.
Okay, thank you.
May I bring them up
And,
here?
sure, bring them up, and if you would like to add something at the end of this, we'd be happy to
Sure, if there are
to
any
hear them.
additional questions.
Sure.
Would you be here if she filled out the forms correctly?
No, we would not. Had she put 10 rather than 12, this would have never come to you. It was that mistake she made, she just took 6 times 2 without thinking it through carefully and put 12, and that triggered the whole.
And it was 10 at the time when she was filling out the forms.
Yes, sir.
But there is some evidence that Mr. Eschenbacher has found that there was a change of ownership in which
I
the
heard
number
that,
was
but-
reduced to 5 units. So there is evidence that it has not always been 6, although it may have primarily been 6.
Well, it's possible some of them were not rented, but I've represented this family for 20 years, and it's been 6 units as long as I've represented the family.
Well, we'll ask Mr. Eschenbach in a few minutes to clarify his things
Even-
which went by pretty quickly at the beginning.
Even before I became the trustee for the trust for the family. I do have Mick Bolin here. He was the former general manager for Athens Rental Management, which managed these properties before I did, and he has some history with them as well. I believe his history extends to 20 years or so, and perhaps he can clarify some of this for you. So if you don't mind, I'd like to call Mr. Bolin up and have him address some of these issues.
Yes, we assume that he will speak favorably.
Informationally.
Okay. Well, first then, we'll ask if there is anyone who wishes to speak in favor of this.
Yes, that would be me.
Is that you? Okay. All right.
And again, just as a matter, my name's Michael Bolin, Mick Bolin.
Address?
I was previously employed by the Athens Rental Management Company. I was employed there beginning in 1991 through June of 2007. During that time, 19 Oak Street was rented as a 6-unit apartment building, A through F, during the entire time that I was there.
I guess the question is, I don't think we're questioning the fact that it was rented,
Okay.
that 6 units were rented, but that perhaps along the way, somehow, there had been some change. Okay.
Yes,
Let's see.
and I
As
can't
far as
speak
you
to that.
know.
I mean,
Okay.
as indicated on the rental permits that
Okay.
have already been discussed, Mr. Michael signed those, filled those out previously. In 1991, I began in a maintenance capacity, and over the 17 years that I was employed there, moved up a little bit, I guess you'd say.
Okay.
So I can't speak to the actual rental permits or their contents. The only thing that I can say is that I
They were
traveled
rented.
with code on numerous occasions to the building personally and inspected, A through F,
Okay.
so that it was being used, as a 6-unit apartment building with those 5 parking spaces from at least 1991. Prior to that, I can't speak
Okay.
to.
And Mr. Michael owned the property during that long period of time?
Correct.
From 91, at least?
Well, I would assume it's Mr. Michael directly, whether it was the
Okay.
Athens Rental Management Company or Managed
Okay.
Investment Assets, I don't know the exact ownership over it. I was employed by Athens Rental Management Company, and, we manage those properties.
Okay. Questions? All right, thank you very much.
The other thing, too, there are 5 separate water meters in the basement. There's 1 meter coming into the house, but each apartment is metered separately, A through F. So, and it's been
5
that
or
way
6?
as well. I'm sorry?
5 or 6?
6, A through F.
Okay, you said 5
You did
meters.
say
I'm sorry.
You said 5 meters.
I'm sorry, 6,
Okay.
A through F. I
Okay.
apologize. There are separate meters. There's 1 meter coming into the
Okay.
house. There's a separate meter for each one of the apartments because they're metered separately. And those have always been there as well.
Good.
So, okay?
Thank you. Is there anyone who wishes to speak in general comment or in opposition?
Well, I guess I fit in a general comment.
Okay.
We're not denying the existence of the apartment, it's always been there. What we're going on is on the 1991 rental permit submitted by the Athens Rental Management Company, they put down as the number of units 5.
Okay, and this
The
is...
next permit we got was requesting 6.
Okay, so the one that requested it in 91 was for 5 units?
Yes.
Okay. And then the next request for a permit?
Well, the next permit application we
Okay.
got,
And when would that have been? Would it have been the next year?
This year.
This year?
the
Okay.
one that should be in your packet that's
Okay.
stamped refused,
Okay.
that's the one this is based on.
Okay, so according to your files, through the 90s until now, the rental permit has said 5,
Yes.
although they have been renting to 6, which had been the tradition there.
Yes,
Is that
which we
correct?
found out.
Okay,
So that's what all this is based on. I mean,
right.
we thought it unusual at the time that they would go from 6 to 5.
Right.
When it's still the same number of units in the building. And we quite often advise people who have occasionally done that they want to take a rental unit off the market or off the files for any one of a number of reasons. They aren't going to rent it for a long time. They've decided they just are tired of renting it. This happens most often with people who have like basement apartments in their homes or rent out rooms in their house. They get tired of it for a while or it changes hands.
Yeah.
So they let the rental permit lapse or they let us know that it's no longer a rental. And then, of course, if it goes over for a year, if there's any grandfathered circumstances about these particular properties, that's lost. So we always advise people that even if you aren't going to rent that basement apartment or rent out those rooms, that it's advisable to keep up permits
Okay.
for future reference, for future use in case you want to sell. But as I said, in this particular case, all this is based on, I'm not denying that the apartment was there, I'm not
Sure.
denying that it had been
That's
used. The
been-
one time I was there, it was empty and I was told that it wasn't used.
Okay.
But this is all based on the paperwork, the 1991 permit that said 5 and the one this year that said 6.
Okay.
It's
So-
sort of, not quite, but it's sort of like what we went through with Jack Stauffer's place is on 19
Right.
South Congress. Not changing the number of occupants, you're just changing the number of units.
Sure, right,
So,
right.
but that was considered a
Okay.
legitimate change.
But, in fact, it was not necessarily a mistake that they changed from 6 to 5, because in fact, you know, at some point, that apartment was empty.
Yeah, well, that's what I was told at the time.
Okay. But you said you went there and it was empty
Yeah.
on one occasion.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I'm not sure the circumstances why they went to 6 to 5, because that
Okay.
was 17 years ago. But
Okay.
that's how it was filled out, and that's what we have to go by.
Okay. Okay, so let's talk about whether we can just decide that he's not requesting a variance, but something else.
Well, I think in order to say that this is not a variance request, then you'd have to say that there was something wrong with the 91 permit, or the 91 permit was not handled properly,
Right.
and there's no proof of that.
Right, and so in fact, there may not have been an error made on anybody's part, and in any case, it wasn't the zoning
No.
office.
The only error our office made was not picking up that the apartment was being used again.
Okay,
So.
all right. So at some point along it.
But
came-
this is all just based on the paperwork and the 2 permits.
Okay, so does it seem legitimate to you then that you advertised for a variance and that that's what we're being asked to do?
Yeah, I mean, if you feel strongly enough about it, we could put this on hold, and if you would want an administrative decision, if you wanted to review that, but it's
mean if we
all
want-
toward the same end anyway.
Right, okay.
So,
Well, we can reject the variance based on the appellant's request and just decide whether this was always 6 units or not, and go with that.
But apparently
Continue
it
to
wasn't
go.
always 6 units.
Well, there was 1 year, and
You
apparently
don't
there
know
was,
if it was 1
yeah,
year, there was a period of time.
yeah. And,
and to be honest, just because I was told that, doesn't mean it was so.
yeah.
Mr. Boland wasn't the one who took me around.
Well, that's what we have to
So-
decide from those documents that he gave us. We have to make a decision whether this was historically 6 units or maybe at one time
Well,
was 5.
I guess what I'm saying is there is a file that the owner of the property has, which includes things. There's also a file with the code office, which doesn't say precisely the same thing.
Are these permits renewable yearly?
It says so in the code book that they're supposed to be renewed yearly. We don't pursue that because of the amount of paperwork, for one thing, and to be practical, if the information on the permits does not change, if it's the same owner, same address, same number of units, same number of people, same number of parking spaces, if all the information is the same, we don't feel it's necessary to require them to fill out a new one year by year. We have a couple of permits that are probably 15 years old.
So
But
there's
it-
no fee to do this renewal
No,
each year?
no, I mean, you have to pay a rental fee anyway. This
Okay.
is something separate. But there's a couple, just as an example, Good Rentals, Pete and Barbara Good. They haven't changed their address, they haven't changed the number of people, they haven't changed anything. So in our minds, why make them fill one out every year if it's the same information? The main point of these permits is to have the information about these rentals and proof that we know about them and that they've been approved is what they've written down. That's one of the main reasons for these permits, is to gather the information about the rentals, as well as to prove that they've been approved.
So I would assume then the code office, when they go out to do their yearly inspections, do not take a copy of the permit with them?
No, but in my case, I always look at it before I go.
Okay. Yeah, that's what I'm just trying to get at, is like,
Yeah.
recognize that, so.
Yeah.
So you were aware that there should have been 5? And there were 5?
If it had been brought before me, I would have said, well, yeah, it says 5 here, now it says 6, which is why it was refused. But I can't stand here and say I know exactly how many units are supposed to be in every single building.
So the renewal of the permit triggered all of this?
Yeah,
Okay.
I mean, technically, it's different people taking care of it now.
Right.
Different address that you have to
Sure.
send the notices of violation to,
Okay,
different people to contact, so.
okay.
So potential clerical error on their part could have possibly set all
Yeah.
this off.
If it was a clerical error or whatever the reason was,
Right.
why ever they put 5 down, that's what triggered it.
Since the occupancy isn't changing and the parking's not changing.
Yeah.
Well, the parking has changed from 5 to 4. I mean, that's, the variance
That has-
says 4.
Well, I would argue with that. If we are going to address this as a variance, and there is room for 5 spaces, and it has been 5 before, I would certainly request that they go back to allowing this to have 5 spaces, if they are in fact available, which we've been told they are.
Well, I mean, if nothing else, the officer whose area that is can go down and measure, make sure, because however many spaces you claim, they have to be of a certain size.
Okay.
So,
Other things. Thank you.
I
Okay.
kind of favor John's idea of like, maybe let them go back administratively, let's say you didn't fill the permit out, fill it out like how you really want it to be filled out, submit it, and if it's the same, they wouldn't need a variance. Everything would be the same if
Okay,
that's what
what's-
truly was meant to happen.
What's the problem with granting a variance to the building?
Now, that's actually, we are giving more privilege to this thing, for now, they can continue their grandfathership, and then if there's a major change later on, then they have to come back and get a variance,
Well, nothing.
discuss it.
It might be in our favor too, because we could
Yeah.
keep it to 10, whereas once the kids get a hold of it, they might think 6 times 2 is 12, we want 12.
I expect they already do, but I
So-
don't think that would be much of a
So
change.
that could happen. This way, we can limit it to 10 for the rest of us.
I think he would probably love to have their
If you put it
variance.
in the variance that it's 10, it's 10.
It'll be 10.
And if you
It'll
say it's
stay that
5
way.
spaces, assuming that there can be 5 spaces, it's 5 spaces.
So we can limit it.
No, the variance is
For
asking for
future.
12.
No, 10.
That's where it says,
10.
where it supposedly needs 12.
Ah,
Because
okay.
that was
Right.
based on 6 units.
No,
6
it's
units.
asking
Yeah.
for
6 units.
So we know it's
asking
fine.
for-
6 units, remember.
And
Doesn't
why
name
does it
the
say
number.
12? Okay, yeah, 6 units, then
6
you have to have
times
2
2
per
is
each unit.
Right, but this doesn't name the number of people, but we can always put that condition in. We can put in whatever conditions we
I think
like.
they need a minimum 2 per unit for the space, for parking space,
Well, they
regardless
do.
of the number of people.
That could be
Well,
the
they
only
don't have-
stickler, is to say,
they
you
don't
need
have-
10 spaces now,
Well, of
period.
course, because the parking regulations have changed,
changed.
but they are presumably grandfathered.
And he can't have 10 spaces in there.
No, but we could put a condition in that says he has 5 if the inspector goes and measures and says there's
No,
room for
he's got
5.
more.
The variance wording was based on the fact that the permit application submitted, it said in the area for maximum persons, or maximum occupancy level of persons per unit, it said 2. So I assumed that was 2 per unit, 12. But if it's 10, then that could certainly be part of the variance or conditions or whatever.
It doesn't ask to identify each unit, it says maximum occupancy.
Well, what I was
Maximum two.
going to say also is,
Some of
if you
what?
decide to go ahead with the variance, and the variance is approved, they would have to fill out another ground permit application anyway, because the last one in the folder is refused.
Right.
So what would happen is, if a variance were approved, they would fill out another permit with all pertinent, correct information, 6 units, 10 people. We always put a copy of the variance in the folder, so from now on, people could see that 6 units and 10 people has been approved by, not by us, because the zoning board said it was okay, if you approve the variance.
Well, I'm not sure whether I'm better off with the variance or not. I'm just trying to maintain the property the way I have historically known it to be. And quite honestly, I'm not interested in a change in any sort. So if the board decides to just issue the zoning permit as it is,
We
then
don't issue zoning permits.
well, then why did Mr. Miller ask me to file an appeal
He asked you
of the
to come and
denial?
request a variance.
It
No.
could also be that Mr. Miller, what he meant was to file, get the variance, so it's okay.
Sure, exactly.
Quite honestly, from a regulatory standpoint, I don't care. Whatever will make the city happy. I just want it to be the way it was originally designed to be and the way it's currently being rented.
Okay.
Okay,
Well,
now
with the
you-
variance, I'm sure it's not going to be with 4 or 5 parking spaces. We probably
Yeah.
might require more than that.
Well, I can't
It's
create
not
parking
available.
spaces.
They can't create
They can't.
them, and
It's
it's
not- doesn't
grandfathered as it
exist.
is.
Well,
We
I'm
could
grandfathered
request
in.
5, if there is space for 5, because there was at some time in the permit 5. So we could make a condition that there would be 5, assuming that there is space for an additional 1. We can make a condition that there are 10 people and 6 apartments.
The other thing is, well, two things, whether you say the code office acted incorrectly or whether you give them variance, the result is the same if the
Exactly.
variance is approved. It's 6 units and 10 people, one way or the other. As far as the parking goes, if you say there are 4 spaces there, someone's able to slip in a Yugo, we're not going to say anything, a 5th car,
Right.
as long as it's off the sidewalk, off the street, not on the lawn or anything. I'm sure Mr. Shostak would agree with me that there's very little room, if any, to create any more parking.
Right, I
That's true.
understand that.
So it's just, if you would put down 4 parking spaces, or if they would, that's fine with us, because we're not worried about somebody putting a 5th car in there if they can squeeze it in.
Okay.
But in the future, if they have a major remodeling, I mean,
If they have any kind of major
then
remodeling
the
there.
variance, they can install.
Well, it depends on the remodeling. If it's like Jack Stauffer and they keep the same number of people but change the number of units, they still have to come before you guys.
So that variance is voided then?
Yes, because it would be
Yeah,
for 6
well,
units.
again, if that's what they
Yeah.
want to change, then
Yeah.
yeah, they'd have to come back for another variance. It depends on if they would
Okay.
want to do with the place in the future.
Was this refusal a 2009 rental permit for the coming year? Is that
I don't know, well, it's for
refused?
2008. We
2008,
just,
into
So-
2009.
yeah.
It's what?
It's for the 2008 calendar year, but the way we view it, it was for 2008 extending into 2009.
So it's not up at the end of the month? That you
No.
have to file?
No,
So it was refused, can he file, and he has to get a variance rather than to say, okay, I'll file a different
Well,
request?
if he wants to
a
say
different
6
permit.
units, yeah. Because as I said, this is all based on the fact that the last approved permit for this place from 1991 states 5 units.
Which was the
And
clear
it- and
delay by
that's
her
all
at
we
the
can
kitchen
officially
table
go
filling
by.
out the form.
I
Yeah.
I haven't seen that, but I'm not arguing with Paul. Quite honestly, either way will work for me. And it's not my intention to remodel, my intention is to maintain it as it is. In a few short years, I'm going to be hitting retirement age, and you're not going to see my face up here asking for some change. All I'm saying to you is, when we applied for a refinance of these properties to assist the family, by the way, the change in ownership was merely procedural. It was owned by Sammy and Terry Michael, and then they just transferred it from themselves individually to the LLC that their trust owns. So there's no real change in ownership per se. In any event, the expectation of the bank is that a certain amount of rent will be produced by this property. And if you deny that 6th apartment, that is a significant impact on that.
But
and
you
that'll
remember
trigger-
that financial hardship is not one that we typically consider very
I
much.
know, I know it isn't, but I'm telling you that from my perspective as trustee, it becomes.
Okay, is there anything additional that you want to
Yes,
add?
one thing that came to mind, Mr. Eschenbacher mentioned that the unit was vacant when he was there. I don't know whether that was because it wasn't rented or some other reason.
Okay.
My understanding is that it's always been available and has been rented.
Okay, so I think it's safe to assume that it has traditionally, even if not always, been pretty much a 6-unit place.
Correct.
And I'm assuming that you would be satisfied to have 10 tenants, which is what your most recent thing said.
Yes, I would.
And Mr. Eschenbacher says that the city would be satisfied if the same 4 parking spaces were available.
And they will be.
Okay.
If
All
I
right.
could create more, believe me, I would.
Okay, so anything else you want to say before we close this for discussion? from-
No, I believe we've explored it pretty well.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Comments? Mr.
So
Whitson?
we're going to go with 4 parking spaces, 6 units.
10 people.
10
10
people.
people. I'm agreed.
Are you satisfied with that? We have to go through the findings and see if it's possible to
match the findings with the
match the
clerical error.
findings to the facts.
Because I do have, I don't know how many people went and looked at this place, and then cross-checked it with the list of...
Yes, right.
Okay.
That's something they have to take up with the housing code.
Right, but we do have one of the considerations about injuries to the public good.
Well, that's true.
And, there were a lot
And
of
the public
things that were...
safety?
Yes, indeed.
Right.
That were still sitting there. Like, I didn't get to go into apartment F, so maybe they don't need to have as many places. Maybe they can maintain it better. And I think we're talking about public good here. Trash all over. Was the trash picked up? I don't know.
Well-
Broken window on the first floor. There was a broken window on the first floor.
We stopped any reinspection and stuff because it's a zoning case. To be
Well-
honest, why go back and reinspect if you guys say, no, you can't use apartment
Right.
F?
Well, but I have no idea what became of the items listed under apartment F. I'm just talking about in general.
In general.
I'm
There
at
are a
the
lot of
general
violations.
list, 1 through 8.
Which suggests the apartments are not maintained as well as they should be.
Exactly. And so
Okay.
that's my comment
Well,
on this.
public safety is
Public safety.
something to consider.
Was that public safety that we couldn't discuss? I remember one of the...
No, that
what
was
that?
safety driving through parking lots and
Oh.
ingress and egress. But it says right here in our opening statement that we can consider public safety
Oh, okay.
and substantial justice, I believe.
But not traffic.
All right, not traffic flow. Okay. Any other just general comments before we go through the findings? And you certainly should say any and everything you want to at the findings. Okay.
Want to make a motion?
Yes, please.
Okay. I move to grant a variance to the property 19 Oak Street, Managed Investment Assets LLC appellant from Section 2311, Table B, off-street parking requirements to allow 6 rental units where 5 rental units are allowed with 4 current parking spaces where a minimum of 10,
A
would
maximum
be-
of 10
maximum of 10
tenants. Total.
tenants.
Total.
Okay. With a maximum of 10 total tenants. End.
I second.
Okay. Okay, the first thing to be considered is the practical difficulty and undue hardship. Would our denial of this create an undue hardship that is not necessary for the public purposes?
No. Simply, it puts it back to where it's been for the past 20 years.
Okay. Exceptional circumstances. Exceptional circumstances applying to this property or its intended use that do not apply generally to other properties in the same zone.
Well, if it's all based on a clerical error, that's a circumstance that could happen to any property, but let's hope that it doesn't happen as often as it could, and I think that's what caused all this.
I'm sorry, under item 1 you said no hardship or hardship?
He said no hardship, it would not create a
It
hardship.
would not be a hardship.
To-
Okay.
No.
Okay. I agree. I think there is an exceptional circumstance, and whether it was a clerical error or whether it was a temporary effort to not use the apartment, and then somehow it just got started up again. It has certainly traditionally been used, it seems, as 6 units, even when the permit for many years said 5. Okay. Preservation of equal property rights. Literal interpretation would deprive the appellant of rights commonly enjoyed by others in the same zone and the same vicinity.
Well, depending on their administrative staff, so,
Right. If they don't make any more mistakes.
well, exactly. You know, anybody that makes a mistake then has to deal with that situation, so perhaps.
But we all make mistakes.
Correct.
Okay. The minimum variance. The variance granted is the minimum variance required to make possible the reasonable use of the property.
Yeah, he's not asking for 7 or 8 or to add on to make it huge. He wants it like it was for the past 20 years.
Yeah. I have to agree with that, and I guess I'm happy that they no longer have 14 people in the property. Absence of detriment, the authorizing of such variance will not be a substantial detriment to adjacent property and will not materially impair the purpose of the zoning code or the public interest.
No, there are no objections here this evening.
Well, I do
Other
have
than
an
the- other than
objection.
the
Okay.
safety.
I mean, I'm reading the code, and the code says public welfare. I mean, you say so, but,
Right.
I mean, that's where I'm taking my rationale from. I think that notice of violation dated September 12, 2008, general violations on the property, clean up the trash around the exterior of the property. There was, I don't know how many trash cans, it was all overflowing, it was all over the place. You really couldn't even get a good picture of it all. There was stuff sitting on whatever was the front porch area, because there was snow on the ground.
And we assume that some of these messy tenants have gone home.
Well, leaving it all behind, and who's ever maintaining the building is not, obviously not going down and taking a look at it.
Was that under the present management or the previous management?
She's talking about recently.
Well, this is September
September.
12, 2008, when this site, I'm assuming it is, under the current management. There was a broken window on the first floor. There's something
Those
here
have all
that
been
says...
corrected.
Pardon?
All of them have been corrected.
Okay, but there is a broken window as of Sunday on the first floor.
I have a maintenance person that I pay to take care of those things, and he informed me before I came here that those have been corrected. If he's not telling me the truth, John, I'll certainly check it out.
Okay, well
But I
then...
can assure you that when I hire staff to do this work, I expect that they'll do the work, otherwise they won't have a job very much longer.
Okay, I don't know, there was a basement window on the first floor that was pushed
But
open.
with regard to the maintenance issue, although I don't think that it's pertinent to your deliberations,
Well, public
I-
welfare.
I inherited the property, not inherited, but I took over the properties in June of 2007 in quite a dilapidated condition. And I have spent most of the money and reduced the income stream to the widow in an effort to try and make it come back to where it was, or at least to meet the code and improve over the code. So you can rest assured that these are not going to be slum properties, but they didn't leave me with $150,000 to fix them up. I'm fixing them from the income stream that the properties produce.
Well, there's no reflection on you whatsoever. I mean, I'm just reading from the piece of paper
No,
the
I
code
know
provided,
that.
and then the
But
visual...
I'm going to
But
ask you all to,
my sympathy
this
is
is
with you.
pertinent information, however, we have closed discussion from the floor.
I'm sorry,
So,
but I apologize.
I do think it's pertinent to allow him to speak, but the discussion really now is among us. So, have we done the last one, not of a general nature? I don't think, as Greg has pointed out several
Yeah.
times, that this occurs really very often when there's a mistake like this and things are done, well, so I don't think it's of a general nature. I want to go back to the first one, of practical difficulty and undue hardship. I do think that I think we probably will agree that we would create some hardship because this has been used as 6 apartments for a very long time, and I think it is an exceptional circumstance. that has caused this event to occur. So, anything else you want to say before we proceed? Okay, we have a motion, we have a second. Are you ready to vote, Greg?
I vote yes.
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 No.
I'll also vote no, just for fun. Okay, you have your variance, and we assume that things will go nicely for you.
Will not see my face here again, I hope.
Thank you very
much. See you, Paul.
Okay, the next case is 0829V. The appellant is Christopher A. Hall. The property is 125 Franklin Avenue. The appellant is requesting a variance from Section 230303B and Section 230308B to allow construction of an accessory structure 5 feet from the city side alley right-of-way where 12 1/2 feet is the required minimum. So, Mr. Hall, no, I'm sorry, Mr. Eschenbacher.
Again, this is pretty straightforward in its explanation of what the appellants want. The one thing I would bring up, in case you haven't been to the site, is that the alley next to 125 is not a used alley except, I think, for 123 and 125 themselves. It's not a through alley up to Grosvenor, so any building there that would be closer to the right-of-way than what's allowed would not affect any real traffic patterns or any problems. It would basically only affect 123 Franklin.
All right. Comments, questions?
I have a question. I got a letter from a neighborhood association member in which he said that that alley is supposed to be, it goes up from Merkle Street, is that right?
No.
It's not
This
Merkle,
particular
okay.
alley starts at Franklin and ends halfway up the hill towards Grosvenor. It's platted, as going all the way down to East State Street, but obviously, if you look at the site, there's a garage there, and I
Okay.
suppose if they really wanted to, they could create the alley, but it's just platted but not used as such.
But some people maybe
Franklin,
use it.
East State,
We're further down from Merkle, we're further north.
yeah.
Yeah, but I think I've walked up there. No?
No.
Okay. Okay.
This alley just starts at Franklin, right next to their house, and goes halfway up to Grosvenor,
Okay.
in reality,
So
even
it
though
really
it's
doesn't
platted
even
from
go
Grosvenor all the way
anywhere.
down to
No.
East State.
Right. Okay, thank you. Mr. Hall and Mrs. Hall, and will you both state your names and your address? And we haven't been asking people if they've been sworn in, but we're supposed to. I believe you have been.
Yes.
Tell us that anyway.
My name's Chris Hall.
And I'm Sandy Hall.
We're 125 Franklin Avenue. We bought this house in August. We just moved to the area this summer. When we bought the house, there was actually already a garage/carport in the spot that we're talking about. It was just dilapidated. It had about a 15-degree lean. With my appeal, I included some pictures. I'm not sure if you got those or not, but
No, do we have any pictures? Oh, okay. Oh,
Yeah.
yeah, we did.
Yeah, we
you
do
can see
have
that it was a
pictures.
very,
Yeah.
Yeah,
I
we
mean,
did.
you know, we had as part of the home inspection, and we pointed out one of the walls was bulging. Two of the walls essentially serve as retaining walls. One property sort of behind us on Grosvenor, it's, that elevation is such that the back wall of the garage served as a retaining wall, and over time it had just been pushed. I assume the structure was original to the house, so late 30s or so. And it didn't even have, it didn't have a roof on it. It even had some struts, but not even serving as a roof. So it was one of our sort of early projects to go ahead and take care of that. Partly for the eyesore, we'd like a place to park our car that didn't get snowed on. And in the process of doing this, it seems like the sort of near corner that's closest to the alley might have actually been over the property line, technically a few inches or maybe even half a foot onto the city property on there with the alley. But like Mr. Eschenbacher said, the alley doesn't go anywhere. It's actually filled with, I don't know if it's just debris over the years, if it actually ever went anywhere or what, but it just, I mean, it amounts to a shared driveway between our property and 123, which is rented right now. So, in order to try to comply with code, we've changed the size of the plan for the building to actually come to so we wouldn't need the coverage variance anymore. We worked with Bob Mullins at the code office to get the size of the building down so it would be right at what would be allowed by code for that. It's just a setback variance because the code calls for 12 and a half feet from a city alley.
All right.
We've moved it actually 5 feet from where the old structure, the dilapidated structure was, moving it 5 feet off the alley to actually come closer to complying with code, but our backyard's just not very wide and there's no place else to go with it, so.
Okay, so, but you're still asking for a structure 5 feet from the city out right of
Yes,
way? Okay,
yes.
okay, so this is still correct. Yeah, this is still correct, and that's the only thing you're asking for?
Yes.
Okay, all right.
And if you've been to the property, you see that the construction was stopped, but that we were given the go-ahead to replace the 2 walls that were serving as retaining walls. Because through the code staff, we've realized the impact, and the neighbors behind were worried about the impact on their yard coming in, and so that's why,
Which is actually how the complaint.
right, how it came to the code attention. And so that's why there is construction on the property currently.
Okay. Anything else?
So you started the construction without a permit?
We just, I didn't dawn on me the way that the building was in such condemnable state that I thought it would just be considered sort of repairing the structure and bring it up to a code. I guess in some passing conversations we had with the officers that came to the house, that apparently in a structure like that, if you did it wall by wall,
Yeah.
just repairing, you don't need a permit at all. Whether or not that's feasible or advisable is a
In this
different
case, maybe
discussion.
not.
I'm sorry, what was that?
Maybe it wasn't feasible in this case,
Yeah.
given the condition.
Yeah, I think, given that the structure is probably, you probably want to get down and pour a new footer and do all those sort of things to really shore it up and do a nice, I mean, it does partially serve as retaining.
Yeah.
So, like I said.
Anything else? Okay.
We did, I guess, one other thing that, there were a couple letters that we hope that got included there from the neighbors. As Chris mentioned, the neighbors in 123 are current rentals, and we have communication relationship with them and share the driveway and everything just fine. And while we didn't get the chance to have them submit a letter to you all, we had conversation with them, and, they've been great while the minimum construction that was happening, they moved their cars, and, they're in support, we vouch that they're in support of it, even though we don't have documentation.
Yeah, we have some letters here to that effect. Okay, thank you. The next thing we would do is ask if there's anybody in support, and we do have at least 2 letters here. I'll just read you the shorter one. I guess they're just alike. I'm a resident of 121 Franklin, which is owned, I'm a resident owner of 121 Franklin Avenue, a property near 125 Franklin Avenue, which is owned by Christopher and Sandra Hall. They've explained to me that they are currently in the midst of replacing their garage. They've shown me pictures of the old garage as well as of their plans for a new building in its place. I believe that a new structure is a reasonable project for the property and our neighborhood, and I support them in building the new garage. And there's a similar letter from the property owner at 127, Mr. Aspergren. Okay. And I don't know that there's anyone here who wants to speak in opposition, perhaps. Okay. So I assume that unless you have something else to add, we'll close the floor. Okay, and call for a motion for this property.
Okay, I think we can do this. I move in case number 08-29V, Christopher A. Hall, for property located at 125 Franklin Avenue, that we allow a variance from section 23.03.03B and section 23.03.08B to allow construction of an accessory structure 5 feet from the city's side alley right-of-way where 12 1/2 feet is the required minimum.
I'll second.
Things you want to say about this? Before we
No,
start
just
the
about the-
findings? Okay. Practical difficulty on undue hardship. If we say no, would it be an undue hardship that's not necessary to the public purposes?
It will be.
Yeah, they're we deny them their garage space.
Okay. And I believe that they've said in their application that this garage would have a smaller footprint than the previous one. And it is apparently holding up the hill, so that's also a factor. Exceptional circumstances that do not apply to other properties or classes in the same zone. I think you would say it's on a very peculiar little city right-of-way, which is platted but not used. So it's really not encroaching on anything that the city seems to be upset about. Preservation of equal property rights.
Everybody needs to have a nice garage.
Right, yes. People do need a garage and they need to hold the hill up, so, okay. Is it a minimum variance?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Absence of detriment, is it going to bother anybody or the public?
No.
No.
Not of a general nature?
No.
No.
No. Okay, shall we vote?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, okay, done. All right. Okay, next case is Mr. Chrisman of the Hocking Valley Motor Company. It's case 0830B. The zone is B3, and it's 960 East State Street. He's requesting a variance from section 230805C to construct a parking lot without paving it, where the requirement is for it to be paved. Mr. Chrisman.
Call first.
Oh, I'm sorry. Mr.
Paul's
Chrisman.
first.
Yes, he's first, I'm sorry. Can't seem to keep it straight.
This case, before we get too much into it, what happened was he originally wanted to request a variance to not pave this place. In discussions with him, we thought it might be a better idea for him to ask for a temporary use permit. If you've read his letter, you've talked about he's not sure of how long his business will last, how well it will do and stuff. And I explained to him that a variance would mean that this property would never have to be paved, even after he left and stuff. So he decided he wanted to go ahead and go for a temporary use permit. The problem was, he came in the day after I submitted everything to the messenger and printed everything up for you guys. So what I would suggest, and of course if Mr. Chrisman disagrees, he can come right here up here and say it, is I don't think we have a right tonight to say, since we advertised for a variance, for you guys to suddenly turn it around and say, well, we're going to discuss a temporary use permit. I think it would have to be officially advertised as such. So what I would recommend, if Mr. Chrisman is okay with it, is to continue this case or to stop it here. And he can come back next month, because it is enough of a difference in the request, temporary use versus variance, that he can come back right away. And then next month, or at the next meeting, you could discuss it then as a temporary use permit request rather than a variance request.
What do you think?
All in favor? Aye.
Thank you.
Okay, is that okay with you, Mr. Chrisman, that you come back next month?
That's fine, yes.
Okay.
Okay, very good. I think that would work very well.
And we still need to approve minutes too.
Yes, so let's see about the minutes. Has someone read them, and what do you think of them?
I read them and she had some comments on it that was.
Yeah, I think, Paul, I don't know if he gave you copies, but he sent me an updated copy.
Yeah, we all got them.
Oh, okay.
Okay,
And I looked at the tape, they made me a copy. I gave him something new, but yes, this is what it said.
I
was
move
fine
to
with
approve
it,
the
Paul.
minutes.
I
As
second that.
submitted.
Okay, anything else we need to talk about? We are adjourned. Thank you very much.